I was holding a homemade lemon cake, my dad's favorite, when my mother opened the door and said the words that broke everything. We all agreed. You're not welcome at your dad's birthday party. No build-up, no warning, just that. Delivered with a rehearsed calm and a look that said she knew exactly what she was doing. For a second, I thought I misheard her. I stood on the front porch of the house I grew up in, half in the past and half in the present, the scent of honeysuckle thick in the humid Austin air. My fingers clutched the plastic cake carrier. My heart thudded like a dropped stone in water. The last time I stood on this porch, it was my dad's 60th. He wore a paper crown, made a joke about getting wiser, and we all laughed until our stomachs hurt. This time, there was no crown, no welcome mat, just a door, cracked open like a verdict. Just minutes earlier, I had parked in the same driveway where I learned to ride a bike. I remember sitting in the car, staring at the house, imagining the moment, Dad opening the door, seeing the cake, maybe tearing up a little. A hug. A thank you. That's how it was supposed to go. What? I finally said, blinking. Are you serious? Mom didn't blink. This isn't the time, Alyssa. It's his 63rd birthday. And we're celebrating it, but you won't be part of it. She let the door close halfway, leaving only a narrow wedge of space between us, as if she couldn't risk the whole thing being open, as if she didn't want the truth to spill out and stain the walls behind her. I looked down at the cake, lemon with blueberry glaze, baked from scratch in my Seattle apartment the night before I flew in. Not just a dessert, it was a bridge, a symbol that maybe I could still be part of something. I hadn't expected fanfare, but I hadn't expected exile either. "Where's Dad?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom's expression tightened. "He's out right now. Golf with your uncle and Pastor Ray." "Did you tell him I was coming?" "We told him you said you wouldn't be attending." "That's not true," I said flatly. "I've called, I texted, I emailed. I never said I wasn't coming." "You made it clear," she said, "by not showing up to anything else, by going quiet. You've distanced yourself, Alyssa." The words hit like she was reading from a script she wrote years ago. My mother had always been fluent in rephrased realities. Rewrite enough chapters and even the truth forgets what it was. Behind her, I heard the clink of glassware and soft laughter. The party was happening now, early. A full house of family, most of whom hadn't called or texted in months, and none of them had told me. "Mom, I just got off a plane. I'm staying at a hotel downtown. Can I at least talk to Dad?" She closed the door another inch. "He doesn't need stress today." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I didn't trust my voice anymore. The lemon cake felt heavier. I had flown 2,060 miles and carried it across 2 airports. It was a gesture, a mistake, apparently. "Okay," I said. "Got it." Her eyes flickered, maybe with guilt, maybe not. "Alyssa?" "No," I said. "It's fine. I get it, really." I turned away before she could finish whatever polite cruelty she had lined up next. My heels clicked down the porch steps. I kept my head high, but every breath felt like I was inhaling cement. I didn't cry until I got to the car, and I didn't call anyone. Not Dad, not Kendra, not the cousin who used to have my back. I sat in the parking lot of a gas station off I-35, the lemon cake in the passenger seat, untouched and sweating through the plastic. I stared at it like it might still give me answers, but it just sat there, soft, silent, and out of place. Kind of like me. This was supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful, but somehow I had been written out of the script. There's a folder on my desktop labeled Project Graham. Inside, spreadsheets, saved Airbnb links, fishing charter comparisons, whale-watching PDFs, a trip countdown widget, and a daily itinerary broken into color-coded blocks. I created that folder 2 years ago, the night after Dad told me he was finally retiring. Not in some emotional announcement, just a passing comment over the phone. I was walking home from the office in Seattle, umbrella flipping inside out in the wind, when he said, I turned in the paperwork today. I'm officially done." "Done?" I said, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear. "With the department. 37 years. Feels weird." There was a pause. Then he added, "There's this lodge in Alaska I used to dream about when I worked night shifts. Just something I saw in Field and Stream back in the day. You fly in, fish off the grid, watch eagles overhead. One day, maybe." He said it like someone mentioning a childhood toy he lost. A soft, impossible kind of wish. The kind no one ever expects you to remember. But I did. That night Project Graham was born. At the time I was newly promoted, making just enough to stop counting eggs in the fridge. I still packed my lunches in reused takeout containers, but I started saving, quietly, purposefully, because I knew if I didn't plan it, no one would. Mom hated the outdoors. Kendra's idea of roughing it meant spotty Wi-Fi at a vineyard resort. So I planned like a general. No fanfare, just discipline. I cut Netflix, I sold my snowboard, I skipped 3 weddings I didn't want to go to anyway. By the end of year 1, I had $18,000. By year 2, $43,200. But it wasn't about the number. It was about what the number meant. I had no kids, no husband, no perfect feed to show off. But I could give my dad something pure, a memory that belonged to just us. A moment no one else could shape. Last Christmas I brought it up. The table was full, cedar garland, roasted ham, pecan pie on the sideboard. Kendra was texting under the table between bites of dinner rolls. "So," I said, "what if we did something different for Dad's next birthday? Like, Alaska different." Dad looked up, surprised. "You serious?" "Yeah," I said. "Fishing lodges, glacier trails, all of it." His whole face shifted. Not just a smile. It was like something lit behind his eyes. A younger version of him stepped forward just for a second. But then he glanced at Mom. She smiled, controlled, hollow. "Could be fun," Kendra said absently, not looking up. That should have been a sign. But I left that night with hope, a bag of cookies, and the idea that maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing we finally did right. 3 months ago, I finalized the dates. I took 2 weeks off work, booked the lodge, paid deposits on everything from charter flights to waterproof hiking gear. It cost $38,200. I paid it all myself. I didn't ask for help, not because I didn't need it, but because I didn't want the dream to come with disclaimers. The itinerary included a wildlife cruise, a fly fishing day, and a Northern Lights lodge with a porch that looked like a painting. I even printed out luggage tags, Graham Family Alaska 2024. I tucked them into gift boxes with black tea samplers and paper maps dotted with sticky notes. 2 weeks ago, I brought it all to Sunday dinner. I spread the brochures on the table like blueprints, like a campaign I'd worked 2 years to pitch. Mom didn't touch a single paper. Kendra glanced at the wildlife cruise and said, "I'll have to see if my firm will let me be offline that long." "I thought this was about Dad," I said quietly. "It is," Mom replied, "which is why we should talk about what kind of celebration he really wants." I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning of the rewrite. Not just of the trip, of the narrative. Still, I kept hoping. Because I had the picture in my head, Dad on a boat in the Alaskan mist, eyes closed, rod in hand, smiling into the wind. A scene pulled from the pages of the magazine he once loved, a moment real enough to melt everything else. And then last night happened. The door, the lemon cake, my mom's voice, cool and final. "You're not welcome." Now I'm sitting in a hotel room downtown. The windows are fogged from the rain. The Alaska folder is open on the bed like an autopsy report. I keep staring at the lodge photo, a wooden deck lined with rocking chairs, a fire pit glowing beneath a sky full of stars. I thought I was building something sacred, a place where silence could be soft, not sharp, a memory that could outlive resentment. But now I see it clearly. I was the only one who ever believed in it. I knew something was wrong the second I turned onto Westlake Avenue. The street I grew up on, usually lined with empty curbs and parked minivans, was suddenly overflowing with cars. Not just any cars, recognizable ones. Cousin Jamie's Jeep, Aunt Colleen's Subaru, Pastor Ray's vintage Ford, all parked bumper to bumper like they were tailgating something. I slowed down, heart thudding. The GPS said I was still 2 blocks from my parents' house, but the anxiety in my chest had already arrived. I parked half a block away and sat in the car, staring through the windshield like it could give me answers. This wasn't a casual get-together. It was a full-blown birthday party, and I hadn't been invited. Not mistakenly, not accidentally, deliberately. The lemon cake, the surprise trip, the months of silence, it all clicked like puzzle pieces dropping into place. They'd planned it this way. They had known. I walked toward the house, each step heavier than the last. I wasn't even sure what I was doing. Confronting them? Crashing it? I hadn't prepared for this kind of betrayal because who prepares to be erased? Through the front window, I saw decorations, a banner stretched across the living room that read, "Happy 63rd Thomas," in glittery gold. Balloons, catering trays, wine glasses, and clusters of people talking, laughing. Even a hired bartender in the corner, shaking something in a steel mixer. I recognized every face. Uncle Rob, who hadn't texted me back in months. My godmother, who'd been meaning to catch up. People who'd known me since I was a baby. All here, all complicit. And none of them had thought to ask, "Where's Alyssa?" I knocked. Because even now, some part of me refused to walk in like I belonged. It took a full 30 seconds for someone to answer. The door finally creaked open, and there stood my cousin Naomi, in heels, party-ready, holding a cocktail napkin. Her face crumpled in surprise. "Alyssa, I didn't know you were coming." I forced a smile. Neither did I. She stepped aside, hesitating like she wasn't sure if she should let me in. But she did. And just like that, I was inside the party I'd been excluded from, like a ghost at her own funeral. The noise dropped as I stepped into the entryway. People turned. Conversations stalled. Forks paused mid-air. I caught the glances, the tight smiles, the glances past me as if maybe I'd brought someone less awkward to stand beside. I made eye contact with Kendra across the room. She froze, a half-eaten cracker in her hand. Her eyes went wide for a second, then narrowed. Mom appeared in the hallway almost instantly. She didn't gasp, didn't scowl. She sighed, the way you do when something annoying shows up early like rain on a picnic. "Alyssa," she said, "we weren't expecting you." "Clearly." She looked around, then took a step toward me, voice lowered. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time. Dad's birthday, remember?" "Alyssa, don't make a scene." "I'm not," I said, smiling. "You already did." She led me toward the kitchen, trying to contain the damage. I followed, not because she asked, but because I needed to understand what kind of people excluded their daughter from a party and still slept at night. In the kitchen, I saw the seating chart taped to the fridge. I wasn't on it. Dad's best friend had a place. So did my old high school teacher. A woman I didn't even recognize was labeled Joanne Bridge Club. But no Alyssa. I turned to my mother. "So this is the real party?" "I told you," she said quietly. "We needed something everyone could attend." "Everyone except me." She crossed her arms. "You made other plans. Alaska. You didn't ask anyone. You just assumed." "It was for him. You made it about you." That stopped me. I looked at her. Not as my mother, but as a woman who had managed to convince an entire room that her own daughter didn't matter. "I spent 2 years saving for that trip," I said. 2 years. I designed it down to the last detail. For Dad. And did he ask for it? No, I said, but he smiled when I told him. She didn't answer, because we both knew that smile had been real. I left the kitchen and went back into the main room. I spotted Dad standing by the fireplace, surrounded by friends. He hadn't seen me yet. He looked happy, relaxed, holding a glass of wine and nodding at some story being told. I stood there, invisible in my childhood home. I didn't interrupt, I didn't wave, I just watched. Because I needed to know, if I walked away right now, would he notice I'd been there at all? I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my father turned and saw me. It happened slowly, like the scene was unfolding in molasses. His hand lifted mid-toast, his smile paused, his brow furrowed. For half a second his expression didn't change. Then it did. Confusion, surprise, and something else. Uncertainty, like he was trying to make sense of what he was seeing, or maybe deciding what he was allowed to feel. I didn't wait. I walked straight up to him, weaving through conversations and elbow touches and polite laughter. A few people stepped aside as I approached, their eyes scanning the room for someone to intervene. I reached him just as he lowered his glass. "Happy birthday," I said quietly. "Alyssa," he said with a kind of exhale. He looked older than I remembered. Still tall, still broad-shouldered, but there was a heaviness in his posture I hadn't seen before. His gray button-down was perfectly ironed, but his eyes had that dim shimmer of a man who'd been smiling for too low. "I'm glad you're here," he said. "You are?" He nodded slowly. "Of course I am." I glanced around. I wasn't invited. He didn't respond to that, just looked down into his glass. The kind of silence that screams. "Can we talk?" I asked. He glanced behind me, toward the crowd, the guests, the obligation. Then he gave a small nod. We walked toward the den, the one room in the house that still had the old couch from my childhood and the faded football photos on the wall. As he closed the door behind us, the hum of the party muffled like someone turned down the volume on a life that didn't include me. "I thought you were in Seattle," he said as we sat. "I was. I flew in." His hands clasped loosely between his knees. "Your mom said you wouldn't be coming." "Did you believe her?" He paused. I didn't know what to think. That answer stung more than I expected, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. "She told me you had other plans," he continued, "that you'd moved on, that Alaska was just a fantasy, and you didn't want to be part of this." I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. It was creased now, bent at the corners, but I had brought it with me, just in case, just for this. I handed it to him. He flipped it open, quietly. Inside were the lodge details, the printed emails, the trip itinerary, and the hand-drawn schedule I'd made on the plane with little stars next to the things I thought he'd love most. "I spent 2 years planning that," I said. He stared at it for a long time. Then, "I never saw this." Not a single page. The silence was different now, heavy, real. "You told me about it at Christmas," he said quietly. "And I remember being excited. But then your mom said the plans fell through, that you got busy with work." "She lied," I said. "She didn't want me to have this with you." He didn't argue. He just looked down at the folder again, thumb brushing the edge of the page that listed the private fly fishing day. "I kept waiting for you to ask," I admitted, "for some sign that you remembered." "I should've," he said. "I thought you were pulling away." "No," I said. "I was trying to pull you out of all this, out of her grip." His eyes met mine. And there it was, the recognition, the grief, the slow horror of realizing you've been misled by the person you trusted most. "I didn't want a party," he said after a while. I blinked. I told her that. I said I wanted something quiet, maybe a trip, but she said it would be too much, too far. She said you had no interest in helping and that I'd be disappointed if I got my hopes up. "Dad?" "I believed her," he said, his voice cracking just a little. And I shouldn't have. The door opened. We both turned to see Mom standing there, arms folded, lips tight. "There you are," she said to Dad, ignoring me entirely. "People are wondering where you went." "We're talking," Dad said. She didn't move. "Well, the toast is about to start. You should be there." "I'm not finished," he said. Her eyes darted to the folder in his lap. "I see she's been showing you her little brochure again." "It's not a brochure," I said, but she was already talking over me. "This is what I meant, Thomas. She makes everything about her. Look at this. Fancy lodges, overplanned tours, 5-star meals. Who even wants that?" "I did," he said. The words landed like a hammer. Mom flinched, just barely, but didn't back down. "Well, you didn't say that." "I didn't get the chance." The air in the room shifted. Something cracked. And not just between them. Between all of us. "I want to go to Alaska," Dad said. "Not for the trip, for the intent, for what it meant." He looked at me. "Can we still go?" My throat tightened. I canceled everything. He nodded slowly, "But I can rebook it." This time, the smile was real. Quiet, private, the kind that didn't need anyone's permission. Mom's voice broke in. "And what about everything I've done for this party? All the people out there?" "You did it for you," he said. "You always have." She stared at him like she didn't recognize the man sitting there. Then she looked at me. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I said. "I'm just not letting you keep pretending." She walked out. Didn't slam the door. Just closed it softly, like she wanted to control even the sound of her exit. Dad sat there for a long moment. Then, "Let's start over. I didn't go back to the party. I couldn't, not after what had just happened in the den." Dad stayed behind for the toast. Not because he wanted to, but because he felt like he owed it to the guests. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said as we hugged in the hallway. His voice was low and warm, and for the first time in months, I believed it. I stepped out the back door, not wanting to pass through a room full of people who had celebrated my absence. The cool night air hit my face like truth. And just like that, I was gone. Back at the hotel. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I expected the breakdown, the anger, the kind of emotional release that happens in movies when the character finally leaves the battlefield. But there was nothing. Just a strange, humming stillness, like my body hadn't caught up to my heart yet. I kicked off my heels, poured a glass of water, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the folder Dad had held earlier. It was still open to the page with the fly fishing tour. The little star next to it made me feel both proud and deeply sad. Then I opened my laptop. And I started canceling. I didn't hesitate. The flights? Canceled. The airline fees weren't cheap, but I paid them without blinking. The lodge deposit? Gone. Non-refundable. I clicked confirm anyway. The wildlife cruise? Canceled. The private guide with the beard and dog who promised epic trout days and better stories? Canceled. The restaurant in Anchorage with the panoramic view and the reservation I made 9 months ago? Canceled. I went down the list, closing the windows one by one like extinguishing candles. I could have waited, could have talked to Dad again, but something in me needed the finality. Not because I didn't believe we could go eventually, but because I needed to let go of the version of the trip I had built alone. The one made of hope no one else held, the one I carried quietly while my mother built her party without me. When I closed the last tab, I sat there in the blue laptop glow and felt the weight lift. Not all of it. Not the grief. Not the betrayal. But the weight of pretending, of holding a vision no one shared, of keeping it alive through silence and stubbornness. That part was gone. I leaned back, took a breath, and finally let myself feel the ache. Not cry, not yet, but acknowledge it, recognize it. And then I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed Alaska 2.0, just Dad and me. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Dad and a text that simply read, "I meant every word. Let's make it happen." I smiled, a real one this time, and texted back, "We will. Just not the way I first imagined. It'll be better." I didn't hear from my mother. No apology. No explanation. Not even a denial. It wasn't silence anymore. It was absence. A choice. And I finally understood that trying to make her see me was like trying to explain color to someone who only lived in black and white. That afternoon, I called the bank to confirm the refund totals. Most would hit my account in a few days. Some, I'd just have to eat. I didn't care. I opened a fresh spreadsheet and renamed the tab Real Trip 2025. I removed the group bookings, removed Kendra's room, changed the filters from luxury for 6 to peaceful for 2. It felt good. Better than I expected. Later that week, Dad emailed me a photo, him holding the printed itinerary I'd left with him, standing on the porch with the folder in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. The subject line read, "My turn to start planning." I stared at the photo for a long time. He looked older, not fragile, but softer somehow, like he'd laid something heavy down. I imagined him sitting in the den after I left, replaying every party guest, every laugh, every toast, and wondering how many of them had known the truth. Maybe none, maybe all. That night I called him. We talked for 2 hours. About places we wanted to see, about what kind of fish he'd never caught, about whether we'd do the cruise again or skip it and spend more time in the mountains, about the aurora borealis and if it was as magical as it looked online. We didn't mention Mom, not once, and that silence, unlike hers, was kind. It wasn't avoidance. It was survival. It was building something new in the space she had emptied. Before we hung up, he said something I'll never forget. "Thank you for seeing me, Alyssa, for seeing what I needed before I even knew how to say it." I whispered, "Always, Dad." And I meant it. 3 days passed before my mother called. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I genuinely didn't know what I would say. What words could bridge the canyon she had carved with a smile? What apology could undo the moment she stood at the front door and told me, with calm precision, that I wasn't wanted? She didn't leave a voicemail, just the missed call notification, no follow-up text, no email, just that brief, blinking signal that she'd tried, once, then moved on. I waited. Another day, then another. Still nothing. So I called Dad. "She tried to talk to me about it," he said. "Tried to spin it. Said you misunderstood." "Did she admit it?" He was quiet for a moment, then, "She said things got out of hand. That it wasn't meant to be personal." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "She told me I wasn't welcome," I said, "with witnesses." "How's that not personal?" "I know," he said. "She just won't say the words." "She doesn't think she did anything wrong." "I think," he said carefully, "she knows she did. But she doesn't know how to admit it without unraveling everything else." There it was. My mother's specialty. Controlled reality. Her version of events had always been tidier than the truth. Neater, more presentable. The facts weren't the problem, people's reactions to them were. She'd say something sharp, then tell you were too sensitive. She'd exclude you, then accuse you of being distant. And when you pushed back, she'd blink, confused, and say, "I don't understand why you're so upset." It was a pattern I had spent most of my life trying to decode. Now, I saw it for what it was, survival by rewriting. That Friday, I got another call. This time, I answered. Her voice was as composed as ever. No hesitation, no crack in her tone. "Hi, Alyssa." "Hi. I heard you and your father are planning something." She didn't say the trip or Alaska. Just something. As if naming it might validate it. "Yes," I said. "Just the two of us." A pause. "Well, I suppose that's what he wants." "He does." Another pause. "I've been thinking," she said, "about how things unfolded. At the party. I realize it may have come across harsh." "Harsh?" I repeated. She didn't reply. "You told me I wasn't welcome," I said flatly. "That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a decision." "I didn't mean it that way." "How did you mean it?" "I meant—" She trailed off, then regrouped. "I meant it was too complicated to include you in what we had planned. I didn't want you to feel out of place." I stared at the wall. "I grew up in that house," I said. "You threw me a dozen birthday parties in that living room. How exactly would I have felt out of place?" No answer. "I'm not calling to fight," she said eventually. "I just wanted to clear the air." "You didn't clear anything." "I'm trying." "No," I said gently. "You're trying to feel better, not make it better." Silence. I could almost hear her blinking, the shift. The tight recalibration of a woman who had never been told directly that her efforts were not enough simply because they didn't come with truth. "I'm not angry," I added, "but I'm not pretending anymore either." "What does that mean?" "It means we can talk. We can be civil, but we're not going back to the way things were. I won't ignore what happened." Her voice was clipped. "You're punishing me." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." We ended the call without resolution. No screaming, no crying, just the quiet weight of two women who could no longer fake their roles. I stared at my phone for a long time after we hung up, wondering if that was the last time we'd speak for a while, or if this was just the beginning of a different kind of relationship. One built on uncomfortable truths instead of unspoken expectations. That weekend I had brunch with Kendra. She picked the spot, an upscale bistro with $5 coffee and minimalist menus. We hadn't seen each other since the party, and she looked tense from the moment she arrived. "How's Dad?" she asked, settling into the seat. "Better," I said. "We've been talking." She nodded, stirring her tea. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, "for not saying anything. At the party? Or before?" I raised my eyebrows. That wasn't like her. I wasn't sure what was going on. Mom told me you didn't want to be involved. She made it sound like you were pulling away. I should have asked you directly." I didn't say anything. "I think I let her version of things become the easy one to believe," she added, "because it kept things simple." "That's how it works," I said. "She counts on that." Kendra looked genuinely ashamed. She wasn't perfect, but she wasn't malicious. Just someone who had grown up in the same emotional weather I had, and learned to carry an umbrella instead of asking why it was always raining. "We're not kids anymore," I said. "We don't have to keep playing along." She nodded. "Then, are you really going on the trip?" "Yes." "Just you and Dad?" "Yep." She smiled faintly. "He's going to love it." "I hope so." There was a pause. Then she said, "Send me a postcard?" And for the first time in a long time, I believed she meant it. 2 days after brunch with Kendra, a package arrived at my apartment. It wasn't from a store, no label, no Amazon tape, just a sturdy brown box with my name handwritten across the top in sharp, familiar block letters. Dad's handwriting. Inside was a folder. On top was a note. "Your turn to relax. Let me take the lead for a while. Dad." Beneath it, printed pages, a rough itinerary, highlighted maps, 3 magazine clippings, and a yellow legal pad covered in bullet points. At first I laughed, then I cried. Because for 2 years I had carried this dream like a secret. I had folded it into spreadsheets and spreadsheets into hope, and now he was carrying it too. His plan wasn't perfect. He had listed a lodge I'd already ruled out for being too close to a highway. His fishing charter idea had a 2-star rating. The sequence of days didn't make a lot of logistical sense. But that wasn't the point. The point was that he was trying. Not for Mom, not for the family. For me, for us. That night, I called him. "Got your package," I said. Figured it was time I did more than nod and say, "Sounds good." I smiled. "You did more than that." "I want this to be something we build together," he said. "Not just something you give me." We started a new ritual after that, Wednesday night calls. Not emotional debriefs, not family therapy by phone, just logistics, excitement, tiny details. Should we rent a Jeep or a pickup? Do we pack fly rods or rent on location? Are thermal base layers overkill for late June? He emailed me photos of boots. I texted links to lesser-known scenic drives. We debated between guided hikes and self-led ones. He sent me a picture of his old hiking backpack from the garage. The fabric was faded, the straps fraying, but he held it up with pride. Think this'll survive one more adventure? I wrote back, only if it promises not to fall apart before we see the glacier. Every piece of planning was a thread weaving us back together. Each new idea reminded me of a version of him I hadn't seen in years, a man not just reacting to life, but choosing it. There was a lightness in his voice now, something unburdened, and I realized planning this trip wasn't just healing him, it was healing me too. One call started differently. "Do you remember that summer in Colorado?" he asked. I blinked. The one where Mom broke her ankle on day 2 and spent the rest of the trip mad at everyone? He laughed. "Yeah, that one." "Why?" "I remember you and I went on that trail behind the cabin, just the 2 of us. Took 3 hours longer than it should have because you kept wanting to stop and collect pine cones." I smiled. "I still have one of those. It's on my bookshelf." He paused. "That was the last time I remember feeling like it was just me and you against the world." His voice cracked a little. I didn't realize how much I missed that. We didn't talk about Mom, not directly, but sometimes I'd say something, like how peaceful it was not to second-guess every detail, and he'd answer with a knowing sound. That quiet, tired exhale people make when they're both remembering and releasing at the same time. The truth is, we weren't just planning a trip. We were reclaiming time. Time that had been eaten up by noise, by routines, by silence we thought was stability. And I couldn't stop thinking about how many years we'd wasted walking on eggshells for a woman who made a home feel like a performance. This wasn't performance. This was real. The following week I made a slideshow. Not because Dad asked for it, just because I needed to visualize what we were building. Photos of locations, sample dates, budget estimates, and a rough daily plan. I called it Alaska Reclaimed. I emailed it to him. He called 20 minutes later. "You made a PowerPoint," he said, laughing. "Don't act surprised." He paused. "I didn't know how much I needed to see it until now." That Friday, I sent the deposit for a new lodge. Not the original one I'd picked, not the fancy spot with 5-star meals and waterfall views. This one was smaller, quieter, family-owned, 1 hour deeper into the woods than most places dared to go. Their website had a single sentence across the header, "Come here to remember who you are." I booked it. I wasn't expecting anything from Rebecca, not after the party, not after the silence. But her name lit up my inbox on a rainy Thursday morning, just as I was halfway through a client report and trying not to think about any of it. Subject: "You need to know something." I opened it. "Alyssa, I know it's not my place, but I can't keep this to myself anymore. Your mom told your dad you refused to be involved in his birthday, that you were off planning some extravagant trip and didn't want anything to do with the family. I only found out the truth this week. I'm sorry. He deserves to know." "Rebecca." I froze. Not because I hadn't guessed. I had. But seeing it in writing, stated so clearly, pierced through the last excuse I had left for my mother. She didn't misunderstand me. She erased me. I sat in the cafe, people buzzing around me, and stared at that email like it was written in fire. How many conversations had my mother rewritten? How many truths had she polished until they gleamed like lies? It was always her way. Say it with calm, say it with charm. And people rarely questioned her. But now, someone had. That night I called Dad. I didn't plan it. I didn't even rehearse what to say. But he picked up on the first ring, like he'd been waiting. "Hey, Bug," he said, using the nickname from when I was 6 and covered in mosquito bites every summer. "Can we talk?" I told him everything. The planning, the expenses, the brochures and tea samplers and luggage tags, the months of trying to reach him, the silence, the birthday party I wasn't invited to. He listened. When I finished, he didn't speak right away. Then, "I didn't know. I swear to you, I had no idea." "I believe you." I feel like an idiot. You're not. You trusted someone you loved. He sighed, deep and slow, like he was letting go of something heavy and old. Then he asked, "What do we do now?" We stayed on the line longer than usual. He didn't rush to solutions, and I didn't pressure him to make it okay. That was the difference now. We both saw the wound clearly, and neither of us was scrambling to stitch it up before it healed wrong. The next day, he sent an email. To me, Mom, Kendra, Rebecca. I want to clarify something. Alyssa didn't abandon my birthday. She planned something extraordinary. For me. With heart, time, and sacrifice. I wasn't aware of the full picture. I am now. I apologize for ever doubting her. We're going to Alaska, together. I hope we can move forward, but only with honesty. Dad. Kendra responded, "Thank you for saying what needed to be said." Rebecca texted me, "That was brave. I'm glad he knows." My mom didn't reply. For once, her silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like choice. I closed my laptop and sat back, heart pounding. This wasn't just vindication. It was recognition. The person I'd spent years becoming, the one who stood up, who planned, who tried, had finally been seen. That night, I stayed up past midnight rebuilding the trip from scratch. Lodges, hikes, weather averages. I let myself smile, not because it had all worked out, but because it finally felt like it might. It wasn't until 4 days later that I heard from her, not through email, not by phone, but through a letter. An envelope in my mailbox. No return address, but the cursive was unmistakable. Inside, "Alyssa, I wish things had gone differently. I miss the days when you were small, when we didn't have to speak every truth aloud. I never meant to become the person you had to protect yourself from, but I suppose I did. Please know that I'm trying. Love, Mom." Still no apology, no acknowledgement of the lie, but it was the first time she'd admitted even part of the truth. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I just stood in the kitchen holding the paper, feeling the weight of words she couldn't say out loud. Then I folded it, and tucked it inside the Alaska folder. Not as forgiveness, but as proof. Because some truths need paper, they need to live outside of digital memory, something you can hold, reread, refold, and decide what to do with. Later that evening, I opened my journal. I hadn't touched it since everything blew up, but now the words came like floodwater. She didn't say sorry. She said she missed who I was when I didn't speak up. But silence is not peace, and regret is not repair. I closed the cover. In that moment, I didn't feel powerful or bitter. I just felt clear, clearer than I had in months. The next morning, I booked the flights. 2 seats, direct to Anchorage. Dad sent back one word. Finally. And it felt like it. The truth had surfaced. Now we could start something new. The airport was quiet at 6:40 a.m., the way only an airport can be before the world has fully woken up. My father stood next to me at gate B12, sipping black coffee from a paper cup and wearing a backpack that looked like it had seen 3 decades of trail dust and stubborn loyalty. He looked over at me, then at the gate. "Never thought I'd actually be here," he said. "Never thought you'd agree to carry on luggage either," I teased. He chuckled. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." The flight to Anchorage was smooth. We sat side by side, the middle seat left mercifully empty. Dad dozed on and off while I flipped through a travel guide and made notes in the margins. But every so often, he'd stir and glance over, reading upside down. "What's that one?" "An 8-mile trail near Denali. Views of everything. Wildflowers, too." "You're the planner," he said. "Just tell me when to lace up." Alaska wasn't what I expected. It was more. The air was crisp, and the silence felt like an invitation rather than an absence. The light stretched into long, golden evenings, and everything smelled like pine and river and something ancient. We stayed in a small timber lodge off the Kenai Peninsula. No Wi-Fi, no TV, just us, a wood stove, and an open porch that looked out over still water. Our first morning, we took a float plane to a remote cove for salmon fishing. I had arranged it months ago, never sure if we'd actually make it. Watching my father stand in those boots, knee-deep in cold water, casting his line like he'd waited his whole life for that silence, I knew we were exactly where we were meant to be. That night, we cooked what we caught over an open flame, ate on the deck under a sky painted in pink and silver. "This," he said quietly, "is what I wanted." We hiked glacier trails, learned to spot bear tracks, spent a whole afternoon just watching otters tumble in the inlet like children at recess. In the evenings, we played cards, talked, not the heavy stuff, not yet, but enough. He asked me about work, about the parts I liked, the parts I hated. I asked him about teaching, about what retirement might look like now. "Less golf than I used to imagine," he said. "More of this, I hope." And in that quiet space, we found a rhythm. Halfway through the trip, we visited a village where one of Dad's distant relatives had settled after leaving Poland. The Historical Society had an archive with a birth record, his great-grandfather's name written in faded ink on yellowed paper. We took a photo of it. He stared at the image on my phone for a long time. "He really lived," he said. "Right here." Later, I printed it and tucked it into our trip folder next to my mother's letter, History in Layers. On our final night, we sat on the porch again. It was cold. I handed Dad a blanket and poured us each a glass of wine from a local vineyard. "What happens when we go back?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. I stared at the dark water. "We go forward," I said. "Whatever that looks like." "And your mother?" "Still figuring that out?" He nodded slowly. "Me too." There was no bitterness in his voice, just truth, worn down and softened. "Thank you," he said, "for not letting this fall apart." I turned to him. "You're the one who showed up. I just didn't stop hoping you would." He smiled. The tired kind, but real. And then, for the first time in years, he reached for my hand. We sat like that for a while, father and daughter, two people who had seen their family crack and were choosing, quietly, without guarantees, to build something stronger from the pieces. Tomorrow we'd fly home, but tonight we stayed exactly where we were, because for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The flight home was quiet. Dad dozed next to me for most of it, his hand resting lightly on the folder he had slid into the seat pocket, the one with our itinerary, trail maps, and that birth certificate we found in the village office. I watched the clouds outside, drifting like echoes. At 35,000 feet, everything seemed simpler, suspended. It wasn't. We landed to the low hum of a busy terminal and the grayed-out sky of Seattle, familiar, disconnected. The weight of everything we'd escaped pressed back on us as we passed through security and baggage claim, like two travelers walking into a paused story. "Back to it," Dad murmured as we stepped outside. He insisted I drop him at his condo instead of the house. "Too soon?" he said. I understood. He needed space. Maybe clarity. I parked by the curb, left the engine running. He looked at me and said, "We'll keep this going, right? You and me, not just the trip." "You and me," I echoed. He closed the door with a firm finality, and I watched him walk toward the lobby like someone who had finally claimed his own steps. My apartment looked like it had held its breath the entire time I was gone, mail stacked by the door, a few houseplants leaning dramatically toward the window, parched and tangled. I watered them in silence, unpacked my bag slowly like I was moving through thick fog. I pulled the Alaska folder from my suitcase and placed it on the coffee table. For a moment I considered opening it, but instead I sat on the couch, legs crossed, the weight of memory pooling in my chest. My phone buzzed. "Kendra. Just checking in. Did it go okay?" I stared at the screen before replying. It was exactly what I needed. A pause. Then, "Mom asked if you're coming to dinner Sunday." I froze. I wasn't ready, but I knew how the script worked. If I didn't go, my absence would be the headline, proof of the same old story. Distant, dramatic Alyssa, not worth the trouble. So I typed, "If Dad's going, I'll go." Kendra answered quickly, "He is." She's been different lately. Quieter. I don't know. Neither did I. But I'd find out. Sunday came fast. Dad picked me up. We didn't need to say much. The silence between us felt anchored now. Full, not empty. We listened to soft jazz as we drove through familiar streets. The house looked the same. Same cracked sidewalk. Same hydrangeas blooming like they hadn't heard anything happened. Same porch swing, swaying slightly in the breeze. But I wasn't the same. We walked up together. The smell of roast chicken and warm bread greeted us first. Laughter floated from the kitchen, Rebecca and Tyler probably. My chest tightened. Then she appeared in the doorway. My mother, no smile, no storm. "Hi, Alyssa," she said. "Hi." Her eyes didn't dart. Her voice didn't tighten. She didn't step forward, but she didn't retreat either. "Dinner's ready," she said, and stepped aside. We followed. The dining room looked exactly as it had the last time I'd been unwelcome here. Same tablecloth, same candle holders. But there was a hesitance in the air now, like everyone was waiting to see which way the night would bend. Tyler cracked a joke about airline food. Rebecca told a story about their dog getting stuck in a recycling bin. Kendra kept trying to fill the silence with questions about the trip. Dad answered with calm detail. He talked about the float plane, the trail to the glacier, the otters. When he described our cabin's view, he glanced at me, not as a cue, but in shared memory. My mother stayed mostly quiet. Until dessert. She emerged from the kitchen with a homemade pie, blueberry. She set it down in front of me. "Your favorite," she said. My fork hovered. "Thank you," I said. No one else moved. Then she folded her napkin and looked at me across the table. "I read your note," she said. I blinked. "In the folder?" She nodded. "The one after the itinerary." I had forgotten. "I hope you read this someday. I hope it helps you understand. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not pretending either. If we're going to rebuild, it has to be real." She kept her eyes on mine. "I'm not ready to talk about everything," she said, "but I'm thinking about it. I'm trying." There it was, not an apology, not an undoing, but something like acknowledgement, something real, and for the first time I didn't brace against her words. I received them. We didn't hug, we didn't cry, but I stayed for coffee. She poured my cup herself, and when she passed it across the table, her fingers brushed mine. That was new. Maybe it wasn't everything, but maybe it was a beginning, and that, I realized, might be enough. The week that followed dinner felt like standing on uncertain ground, steady enough to walk, but still soft beneath the feet. I didn't call my mother, and she didn't call me, but we were both moving. Small steps, careful ones. I knew better than to mistake quiet for peace, but it wasn't war either. It was something new, the slow work of rebuilding from scorched earth. On Wednesday evening, I stopped by Dad's condo. He had grilled salmon and made jasmine rice, and we ate on the balcony wrapped in sweaters against the early evening chill. The condo overlooked a quiet stretch of the Sound, and for a moment, it felt like we had taken Alaska with us. "You think she meant it?" I asked, pushing green beans around my plate. "I think she's trying," he said after a moment, "and I think she knows trying doesn't erase everything, but it's still better than nothing." We talked about the trip again, the float plane, the bear cubs, the way Dad fell asleep during a ranger lecture and started snoring mid-sentence. We laughed until we couldn't breathe, and in that moment, I didn't feel like a daughter trying to mend something, I just felt like myself. Then he pulled a folded piece of paper from his wallet. It was the note I'd written in the Alaska itinerary, the one Mom had read. "She gave it back to me," he said, "asked me to hold on to it, in case you ever forgot what you said." I didn't know how to respond to that. It surprised me not just that she hadn't kept it, but that she asked him to. Maybe it wasn't rejection, maybe it was surrender, or maybe it was trust. Sunday came again, another family dinner, less tension this time. I brought a salad, homemade dressing, toasted walnuts, dried cherries, small contributions, but intentional ones. When I arrived, the house felt different. Not happy, but less haunted, as if the ghosts of old fights were still lingering in the corners but not screaming to be heard. We all sat around the table again. My mother was dressed simply, hair pulled back. She asked me about work. I answered. She didn't compare me to Tyler. That part still caught me off guard. Midway through dinner, Tyler mentioned the possibility of a fall family trip. "Just a weekend," he said. "Cabin rental, some hiking, maybe a campfire, nothing complicated." The room got quiet. Then my mother looked directly at me. "I'd like that," she said, voice steady. "But only if you help plan it." The words were simple, but they weren't hollow. They weren't performative. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, the first one in years that felt like it came with no strings, no silent scorecard. I paused, looked around the table. "I'd be willing to try," I said. She nodded, not with relief, but with something closer to hope. After dinner, I stayed to help clean up. She was washing dishes when I stepped beside her. We worked in silence for a while. I handed her plates. She rinsed. There was no awkwardness, just the quiet rhythm of two people rediscovering something they hadn't realized they'd lost. Then, without looking up, she said, "I never apologized." The plate in my hand almost slipped. She set the sponge down and turned to face me. Her expression was bare. No mask, no tight smile, no performance. I didn't know how to say it without sounding like I was justifying it all, but I was wrong. I lied. I hurt you. And I kept hurting you, for a long time. There it was. I didn't speak right away. I watched her, studied her, not to catch a crack in the armor, but to see if there was sincerity beneath the years of practiced control. She waited. I took a breath. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It means something." "I understand if it's not enough," she added. "It's a start." We didn't hug. But when we finished the dishes, she disappeared briefly and returned with a small envelope, handwritten, my name in her script. "I've started seeing someone," she said. "A therapist. Her name is Donna. She wants me to write letters I never sent. I started with you." I took the envelope, didn't open it, just held it. She didn't ask me to read it in front of her. That mattered more than I expected. Later, in my apartment, I unfolded the note under the warm light of my reading lamp. The paper was soft, folded 3 times, and slightly smudged in one corner. "Alyssa, I know I can't undo the choices I made, but I want to understand them. I want to understand you. I've spent so long trying to shape everything, including you, and it cost me the chance to see you as you are. I miss you, and I'm sorry. Mom?" I cried. Not the jagged sobs of betrayal, but the quiet tears that come from soft grief, the kind that says, maybe there's still something left to grow. I didn't know where we'd go from here, but for the first time, I believed the map might lead somewhere worth walking, together. Fall arrived like a quiet answer. Leaves rustled outside my window, amber and gold tumbling through the wind like confetti from a past celebration. By mid-October, the air had turned crisp, and the family trip Tyler had suggested, just a weekend getaway, was officially on the calendar. We chose a cabin in the Cascades. It wasn't far, just a 2-hour drive from Seattle, nestled on the edge of a pine forest with a narrow trail that wound down to a cold, clear lake. No cell service, limited electricity, plenty of space but intentionally simple. Planning it with Mom was cautious at first. She texted me links to cabins, and I replied with comments. She asked if I preferred hiking or kayaking, and I appreciated the fact that she asked instead of assuming. We didn't speak on the phone, but we were building something, click by click, choice by choice. When Friday arrived, the 5 of us packed into 2 cars, Dad and I in one, Tyler, Mom, and Rebecca in the other. We met at a roadside diner halfway through for grilled cheese sandwiches and pie. No tension, no veiled comments, just a group of people, trying. The cabin itself looked like something from a movie. Dark wood exterior, smoke curling from the chimney, and the scent of pine so thick it felt like you could drink it. As we unpacked, there was laughter. Light, cautious, but real. Tyler dropped a bag of marshmallows and blamed gravity. Rebecca joked about ghost stories. Even Mom smiled. We divided the rooms without conflict. Dad and I shared a loft upstairs. That first evening, we built a fire and gathered around it with cocoa and blankets. No one brought up the past. It wasn't forgotten. Just momentarily suspended. Saturday morning, I woke early and took a walk alone. The trail behind the cabin was slick with dew and soft underfoot. The trees towered above me like cathedral spires. I let my thoughts wander. How far we'd come. How far we had to go. I thought about Alaska. About the letter. I stopped at the lake, glass still and rimmed with fog, and skipped a stone. It made 3 clean jumps before sinking. Something about that felt symbolic. A message, maybe. That some things need a few bounces before they settle. When I returned, breakfast was on the table. Mom had made pancakes. She didn't say much, but when she handed me a plate, our eyes met. It was quiet, but it was something. After breakfast, we all helped clean up. Dad dried the dishes while Rebecca packed sandwiches. Tyler mapped the trail for the afternoon hike using paper maps instead of an app, which felt oddly nostalgic. The hike itself was peaceful. The trail wound along a ridge with a breathtaking view of the valley. Dad paused often to snap photos with his old camera. Tyler carried snacks and made bad jokes. Mom walked behind me, not too close but not far either. At one point she offered me a water bottle. I took it. Little things. At the summit, we sat on a sun-warmed rock and ate our sandwiches. Someone spotted a hawk soaring overhead, and for a few minutes, none of us spoke. It was a good kind of silence, the kind that feels full, not empty. Later, back at the cabin, we napped. I read a few pages from a novel I'd brought but didn't really absorb the words. Mostly, I listened to the creak of floorboards, the soft shifting of people I loved learning how to rest near each other again. That evening, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm, orange glow. Everyone looked sleepy in that end-of-day way, the kind of peace that comes after effort, after trying. "I was thinking," Mom said, voice almost shy, "maybe we could make this a tradition." Everyone paused. Dad nodded. "It'd be nice." Rebecca smiled. "I'm in." Tyler said, "As long as I don't have to cook." All eyes turned to me. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." After dinner, Tyler and Rebecca started a puzzle. Dad settled in with a book. I slipped out to the porch. The night air was cold but clear, and the stars above the treetops looked like tiny, distant lanterns. Mom joined me after a few minutes. She stood beside me without saying anything at first. "It's beautiful," she said eventually. "Yeah." We didn't look at each other, just stared out into the darkness, shoulder to shoulder. "I've made a lot of mistakes," she said after a pause. I waited. "I can't fix all of them, but I want to be better, not just with you, with all of us." I breathed slowly. "You're doing the work," I said. "That's what matters." We stood there a little longer, and then she surprised me. She reached for my hand. For the first time since I was a teenager, I let her hold it. No words followed, none were needed. Some silences mean more than words ever could. We returned from the cabin just before sunset on Sunday. The roads shimmered with fading light, and fallen leaves skittered across the asphalt like tiny dancers. Nobody talked much on the way home, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt understood. Dad dropped me off at my place. He didn't rush the goodbye, just sat with me for a few minutes in the driveway, the heater clicking in the background. "You think we'll do it again next year?" I asked. He smiled. "I hope so." I nodded. "Me too." Back upstairs, I unpacked slowly. The scent of pine and smoke still clung to my clothes. I placed the trail map and a pressed leaf from the hike beside the framed photo of us in Italy. 2 chapters side by side, 2 bridges built. I curled up on the couch and stared at the photo, remembering the way my dad looked in the vineyard, so at peace. It felt like another life, and yet it was stitched into the present. That week passed quietly. No dramatic gestures, just ordinary days that felt a little lighter. On Wednesday, Mom texted, "Thank you for going. It meant more than I can say." I texted back, "It meant a lot to me, too." It wasn't a long exchange, but it didn't need to be. It was another step. At work, I found myself smiling more. I played music while I answered emails. I joined coworkers for lunch. Tyler sent a picture of Dad holding an Italian language workbook upside down. Lesson 12. Ordering gelato or accidentally asking for motor oil. Jury's out. We laughed through emojis, small digital reminders that things were healing. The next Sunday, I invited Mom to coffee. We met at the same cafe. This time, I arrived first. I grabbed a window seat and ordered 2 hazelnut lattes. She walked in, coat neatly buttoned, scarf tucked just so, but her eyes held a softness that hadn't always been there. "Thanks for inviting me," she said. We talked about simple things: the weather, how cold it had gotten, her favorite holiday dishes. I asked if she was bringing her apple tart to Thanksgiving this year. "Only if you promise to eat 2 slices," she said. It made us both laugh. Then she got quiet, looked out the window. "I've been thinking," she said, "about taking a trip." "Oh? Not far. Maine, maybe, just for a few days." "You should do it." She nodded. "I think I will. I think I need to be somewhere quiet for a little while." We didn't say much else, but the silence wasn't strained. It felt mutual, intentional. That night I came home to find a white envelope tucked in my mailbox, my name in her handwriting, no return address, no stamp. "Alyssa, I know now that forgiveness isn't something I can ask for. It's something I have to earn, through action, not apology, through presence, not promises. I'm learning to show up, to listen, to wait when I need to, and to speak when it matters. I hope you feel the change. I hope it's real for you too. Love, Mom." I read it once, then again. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer beside the others. Forgiveness didn't arrive like thunder. It wasn't loud or sudden. It was her texting instead of staying silent. It was her making pancakes in the cabin and handing me a plate without comment. It was the way she waited when I hesitated, the way she asked without assuming. It was the way I said yes to coffee when I could have said no. It was the way I said, "You should go," and meant it. It was every small moment we chose each other. It was daily, it was fragile, and it was real. I don't think forgiveness is about erasing what happened. I think it's about remembering without reopening the wound. It's about offering room to grow without demanding someone become something else. She was never going to be the mother I used to wish for, but she was becoming someone I could understand, maybe even someone I could respect. And I was learning how to stay present, how to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop, how to accept the peace between storms without assuming it's fake. The following weekend, I dropped off a rosemary plant at her front door. No card, no note, just the plant she once said reminded her of better seasons. She texted later, "It's beautiful, thank you." I replied, "You're welcome. No more, no less." This is what forgiveness feels like. Not loud, not complete, but quietly, insistently, enough. 12 months passed like wind through pine trees, soft in places, sharp in others. It was a year of slow rebuilding, not just between Mom and me, but within myself. Things didn't magically fix. There were awkward dinners, quiet misunderstandings, and long stretches where we drifted. But we always came back, not out of obligation, out of choice. On the first anniversary of Dad's birthday, the one that started it all, we didn't plan a party. No big gathering, no decorations, just dinner, just us. We chose a small Italian restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a tailor's shop in Ballard, one of those places where the tables are always a little too close and the smell of garlic clings to your coat in the best way. Tyler made the reservation. Rebecca brought a tiny cake with chocolate shavings. Dad arrived wearing the same gray jacket he'd worn in Italy, a quiet nod to that chapter. And Mom? She brought a photo. Not of the party she planned last year. but of Dad and me, standing in the vineyard outside Montepulciano, both of us squinting into the sun, holding glasses of wine. It was framed. She handed it to me without words. I placed it at the center of the table. "This is better than last year," Tyler said, unwrapping silverware. "Last year was a lesson," Dad replied. "This year is the response." We toasted with Chianti, talked about work, hobbies, upcoming trips. No one mentioned the past outright, but it was there, in the pauses, in the softened edges of our words. Over tiramisu, Dad raised his glass again. "To clarity," he said, "to repair, to all of us showing up in our own ways." We clinked glasses. Back at my apartment that night, I placed the framed photo beside my bookshelf, next to a candle from Florence and a pine cone I'd picked up on our fall trip. I sat on the floor, tired but settled. Then I reached for my journal. 1 year ago, I was shut out of a birthday party and told I wasn't welcome. Today, I sat beside the same people, different versions of them, and of me. I'm not sure what we are yet, a family still, but maybe a new one built on showing up, even when it's hard. The next morning, I walked to a nearby cafe. Same one where I'd once met Mom with a letter in her bag and hesitation in her eyes. She was already there when I arrived. This time, no envelope, no formal talks, just coffee, just connection. We talked about books, about a friend of hers who had joined a pottery class, about a trip she was considering to Maine. Nothing big, just someplace quiet. Then, toward the end, she said, "I've been thinking of starting a small garden again. Maybe rosemary, maybe lavender." I smiled. "Need a planting partner?" She looked up, surprised. Then, softly, she nodded. "I'd love that." There's no clean ending to stories like this. No moment where the credits roll and everything's resolved. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is choosing each other day after day, to text back, to stay for coffee, to bring the rosemary back to life, to say yes to the quiet work of love, and finally, to mean it. If this story touched you, subscribe to Secret Revenge, because some revenge needs no knives, no screaming, just one spotlight and one shining nameplate, and someone they once dismissed, rising, brilliant and unshaken. See you in the next story.